Perfect Cell from Dragon Ball Z versus Omega Zero from Mega Man Zero. Death Battle has finally released their new video on Cell vs Metal Sonic, and while I will definitely talk about this video at some point, I wanted to give Cell his own video with a different character since I gave one to Metal Sonic. And you guys voted for it, and honestly this is a pretty fitting matchup for Cell and Omega. Both experiments built for combat, evil mirrors of the protagonist of their series, both absolutely thriving on combat, and taking out their enemies in any way they can. And some of the biggest threats, at least at the time they were introduced, of their series. But let's see if either of them can truly claim that title as the ultimate. So without further ado, let's get into our matchup. Starting with Cell, he is one of the prominent protagonists of the Dragon Ball Z series, a being from a future timeline who escaped into our own, and over time absorbed his way and transformed into more powerful beings over time, all for the sake of achieving a perfect form. Battling Namekians, humans, and Saiyans alike, he eventually achieved perfection and an absolute lust for battle. But he obviously needed some pretty impressive abilities to fight on par with the Z Fighters, so let's look at his abilities first. Although I should get this out of the way, so there is no confusion, I am mainly referring to the Dragon Ball Z version of Cell, which would include the manga and anime, so no stuff like GT, but we will be taking account for some of the movies from Toei since Death Battle kind of did something similar, just to get a little bit of a more complete stat line. But either way, let's see what Cell can do. Cell is an interesting character, since his biology is formed out of many different types, which gives him a pretty big pool of things he can do. He can manipulate Ki, a life energy that allows him to shoot out blasts of energy, create force fields, fly, moves things with telekinesis, and with human DNA he can use special techniques that allow him to create copies of himself, or even use other type of energy attacks like Destructo Discs, or the infamous Tri-Beam. And with Piccolo's DNA, he has ridiculous regeneration, basically being able to heal his body from almost anything, and unless you destroy the small cells in his head, he is pretty much always able to reform back at the cost of some Ki. And with Saiyan DNA, he can replicate powerful attacks like the Kamehameha Wave, and teleport with instant transmission by locking onto a living target, and he's able to summon many little copies of himself called Cell Juniors, with these things powerful enough to take on Super Saiyans. But his two most powerful abilities are actually his absorption, which allows him to basically absorb any living life form, and incorporating their aspects into himself, also giving him a boost in power depending on who he absorbs. And his probably greatest ability for someone like Cell is his ability to use his Saiyan DNA to give himself Zenkai boosts. This ability is especially prominent with a character like Cell, since if he's experienced a almost near-death scenario, then he can regenerate and become even stronger, due to the fact that Cell can have multiple near-death experiences within a single span because of his regeneration. As long as he survives an attack, he should be able to get a boost as long as that attack was notable enough to be considered life-threatening to him. But enough with abilities. How powerful exactly is Cell? Well, let's start simply, because by powering up, he was able to threaten the entire planet, which should obviously put him into the planetary level ranges. And he is also pretty consistently stated to be at least solar system level, based on the fact in the manga there are multiple statements referring to the fact that he can destroy the solar system, with there being quite a few things backing this up. But it's not the upper extent of his power, since even characters weaker than Cell in the anime are able to cause explosions that can be seen from a galaxy view, like Frieza. And in the anime, it was even stated that Cell would have threatened the entire universe. And this is backed up based on the fact there are claims of him having limitless or infinite power, And there are statements talking about this area of the Dragon Ball universe being infinite in size, meaning that Cell would scale around the high universal level power ranges at the very least, when he at least has his full power. But when it comes to speed, Cell should be much faster than other Dragon Ball characters. Obviously, a lot of them in the early days are able to dodge lightning, and reacting at massively faster than light speeds, or even moving that fast. But without wasting too much more of your guys' time, Cell should probably be at around the infinite speed level ranges, since again he threatened a infinite universe, and his attack range would have expanded that far. And based on the fact he's faster than characters who can react to his attacks, he should also be in those infinite speed ranges. But there is a way to get this higher when we talk about Metal Cooler, who was able to basically intercept an instant transmission. Now, instant transmission works by transporting you to a realm outside of time, which is an instantaneous process. While this wouldn't necessarily scale to their AP, but intercepting somewhere where time doesn't exist, this would actually put Cooler in the inaccessible levels of speed, if we take everything here a little bit literally. Again, while this is non-canon, it is still something that Death Battle seemed to use for Cell, so for the sake of things, we will use it for Cell here as well. Meaning that Cell can scale anywhere from around high universal with infinite speeds, and you could potentially argue some inaccessible speed ranges. So as a whole, Cell is nothing to scoff at, and he's absolutely very powerful. And in the early days of Dragon Ball, he was still absolutely one of the biggest threats. But can the ultimate life form stand up against the Omega? Let's take a look. Now we get to Omega Zero. Omega was a being created off of the original body of Zero from Mega Man X, made to subjugate all Reploids under one command of Dr. Weil. Omega became the ultimate force, destroying all enemies in his path with absolute glee, with it taking an entire unit of the Neo Arcadia in order to take him out. But even that wouldn't permanently take him out for good, with him coming back more powerful than ever at a later point. But how powerful truly was he? Let's take a look. In terms of abilities, Omega can do a lot. Being able to copy Zero, which should be able to do everything from being able to have superhuman strength and speed, regeneration, target analysis and lock-ons, copying other abilities from Leploids, firing energy blasts, teleportation, dimensional travel, interacting with souls, reducing damage entirely, and his classic Z-Blade, although to a much more powerful extent, which can easily cut through even the strongest Reploids with no issue. And he can even theoretically stop time when comparing him to Zero. And this is only some of the abilities he can do, especially when he got a whole lot more when he absorbed the powers of the Dark Elf, which basically allowed him to do most things, but even to a greater extent, also basically having control over every Reploid that wasn't a select few, and he gets more powerful with his armor off. Plus the fact he's highly resistant to everything we just said. And due to the fact he has Zero's original body, he should be resistant to things that even directly affect technology. But despite all of this, how exactly powerful is Omega? Well, there's a lot of things we can go over, but Omega is arguably one of the most powerful characters in Mega Man X and Mega Man Zero, definitely at least at the time of his appearance, because he was stated to be directly more powerful than Mega Man X and Zero, and he needed a whole team to even put him down slightly, and even this didn't put him down for good. So he should be able to scale to pretty much everything that Zero and Mega Man X can do. And based on the fact that Zero should be able to compare to Lumine, who was able to collapse an entire pocket dimension which contained a sun, which should pretty easily be solar system level, and this is especially something he would outscale easily since this was pretty early on. And he should be able to scale to the gravity power, which functions on the idea of basically opening a rift between the real world and a completely different dimensional space. This is the actual term of this ability, and that is literally what that means. Existing different dimensionally means that you are interacting with a completely separate dimensional space. And based on the fact it's reversing our world's physics, it means that it's a higher dimension, meaning that this would put him in at least around the Universal Plus level tiers. But somehow, Mega Man gets far more insane, because Omega simply by existing was able to form cyberspace, which actually contains multiple different spaces which are considered universes. Over 170 of them at the very least, meaning he would be around the low multiversal level ranges. And we know this because cyberspace, at least in every way, is supposed to reflect something in the real world. So we know for a fact that these are full universes. And there are even theoretical ways we can get this higher, since they should be containing that area where that gravity well was affecting, with that 4th dimensional space. Meaning it could arguably be around high 4th to 5th dimensional in scale. Meaning at a really high end, he would actually be around low complex multiversal. And in terms of speed, they would be well faster than light, scaling off of other characters who can outplace black holes and dodge lasers. But obviously there's a bit more to this, since even Mother Alph has feats that can get them into massively faster than light speeds when affecting the Sigma virus. However, you can get this even higher when talking about characters traveling between the real world and cyberspace, and meaning they would be around the infinite to inaccessible ranges traveling between these two spacetimes. Omega is overall a very powerful threat, and for the Mega Man series is just ridiculous. And while he is intimidating, is he truly the ultimate copy? Let's see how he fares up against his opponent. Okay, now looking at Cell versus Omega. Who would really win between these two ultimate creations? And, well, if you've been paying attention, you can see that this fight isn't really that close. Omega honestly just has way too much going for him in a fight like this. Now, Cell does have his advantages. His regeneration is likely at least a little better since it works at a consistently faster rate, although it's not like he completely dominates this category since Omega should have comparable regeneration to X and Zero, who can regenerate from pretty much most fatal damage, even down to their cores. Plus the fact he has the Dark Elf that can also heal him, although Cell is just a bit more consistent with his. And he probably has a bit better of a general experience advantage since he was able to overwhelm the Z fighters, who are some of the most experienced fighters ever, at least within the Dragon Ball series, most of which have been training ever since they were children. But I'm not going to discount Omega either. He's able to fight characters like X and Zero and several other Reploids who are really highly experienced and have been Reploids with much more experience than they have, but couldn't overwhelm Omega. Meaning, while Cell would take the advantage overall, it doesn't necessarily mean he's taking it by spades. But that's where kind of the advantages end for Cell. Honestly, there's just not really much he can do here. He's just kind of massively outclassed. He has quite a few abilities, but only a few of them would really be doing that much here. Instant transmission is basically useless in a fight like this when fighting a Reploid because they are not really a life force, so there's nothing to really go to with them. Plus the fact that Omega has a lot of what Cell can do, from energy blast to much more reliable teleportation, plus the fact that Zero just has a lot going for him in terms of a huge arsenal, and he even can stop time, which Cell doesn't really have any counter for. Although we can scale him to Metal Cooler, he might be able to move fast enough to not be affected by this. And with Duplication and Cell Juniors along with a Zenkai boost, his absorption may be able to overwhelm Omega, right? Well, not really. Inaccessible speeds, while yes, does mean you can move in a space that doesn't have time, Dragon Ball characters, even far down the line, are affected by time hacks. We see this with Goku, who should be absolutely way more powerful than anything we can get Cell up to at this point in Super, still being affected by Hit's time skip. Might sound like a weird comparison due to the fact we're talking about Dragon Ball Z and not Dragon Ball Super, but it's a good thing to point out. And it's a pretty consistent rule in Dragon Ball that you have to be stronger than the individual using said ability in order to overwhelm it. And based on the fact that Zero's stop time also works on beings who should be comparable in travel speeds when going in between the real world and the Cyberverse, it's still pretty likely that it would also work here. But let's say for the sake of things that Cell's speed can overpower it, since maybe Dragon Ball verse rules might not necessarily mean that the time stop and the time skip are necessarily the same thing, and shouldn't function under similar terms. Even with this, Cell isn't outspeeding Omega, since at best they have similar speeds to Omega, meaning he's not outpacing him, and second of all, while his duplication and Cell Juniors might be trouble for most who they fight off against, Omega is pretty used to being attacked by multiple individuals at once. And that's not even going over the fact that Omega is way more powerful than Cell. We're talking about by a whole dimensional tier here. Omega is at least 4D, while Cell at his highest that most people would normally give him is at the highest end of 3D. And even if for some reason you wanted to make the argument that the instant transmission realm is around 4 to 5D and him just interacting with that means that he should scale to that level, which is kind of ridiculous since he's not exactly doing anything in this space other than traveling through it, but let's say for the sake of things, he can somehow scale to 4 to 5D. Well, based on the fact that Omega was able to create cyberspace, which is much easier to give an argument for being 5-dimensional, and he would be creating this whole realm versus Cell, who is kind of interacting with it. And Omega is doing what he did just by simply existing, compared to Cell, who would have to put actual effort into it. So either way, Omega is going to have a massive advantage in terms of stats compared to Cell. Even Cell's absorption wouldn't help him much here. Omega is a robot and isn't really organic. Reploids don't actually have organic parts to reach, and even if they did, there are a few problems here. One, Omega's armor is actually kind of a hard counter to this, since his armor doesn't actually have any opening points that Cell could really exploit here. And even if Cell could somehow get through the armor, great. But Omega is a lot more powerful without it, and he would be absolutely more powerful, and because of the fact that Cell needs some sort of time period in order to actually get off that absorption ability, and Omega wouldn't let him do that, and again, it's not even likely he can even absorb him, but let's just say for the sake of things he somehow could, Zero is always going to be fighting back, and in this state, he's just going to be way more powerful and probably faster as well, since he just gets that boost from being outside the armor. And when it comes to the Zenkai boost and regeneration, this actually wouldn't help him much either. Not only is the Mega Man series pretty notorious for taking characters out fully, heck, even Zero is known for being able to take out characters down to the soul level, and usually they make sure of that before moving on, like what they had to do with Sigma back in Mega Man X. But with characters like Omega, which is basically Zero without any moral obligations at all to him, he would absolutely be willing to just take out Cell there and then. Even if Cell was able to get one Zenkai boost off, or even a couple, it still wouldn't matter much because it's not closing that insane power gap. Because in the end, Zenkai boosts are still finite, and Omega is arguably just at an infinitely higher level than Cell. And there would just be a point where Omega just decides to just annihilate him in his entirety if he doesn't just do it instantly. There is a lot more I could cover here, but I think you guys get the point. Omega absolutely bodies Cell here, even when giving him stuff from the non-canon Tohei movies. So as a whole, Cell is truly a powerful being, especially back in Dragon Ball Z, but this is where he is outmatched by the true Omega. And overall, Omega Zero just has way too big of an arsenal, way too powerful, and way too willing to kill anyone in his path. So overall, I do believe Omega wins this more times than not. But that's just my take. What do you guys think? Did I get it right, or was there something I missed that would have allowed Cell to prove himself as the ultimate being? This won't be the last time I talk about Cell either, since I'm going to be doing another video with him very soon, talking about his latest death battle. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video even a little, and I hope you guys have a great day. And I hope to see you in the next video. See you guys later, and peace.